Hari Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vatitamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the divine being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the divine being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, 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 and thy blessed beneficence be unto us and to all your beloved children everywhere. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday evening reading of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're getting a good start on the book. In a moment, Jaime will tell us where we are. And if you don't have the book, that's fine. Just follow along with the reading. And we'll have, as always, some conversation from time to time about what's been read and what is said about what's read. So before we go ahead, there's just these announcements. We will have the Wednesday class tomorrow evening on Bhagavad Gita. We're just about to finish that up. On Saturday, we'll have the class on how to know God, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. We're very close to the end of that book as well. And then, of course, on Sunday, there will be a talk. The topic will be announced in Thursday's newsletter. That's what I've been doing since I've been back, is waiting until it's time to announce a title so that that which generates within us generates whatever it is that I'm going to be talking about. So you'll hear on Thursday or Friday morning, depending on when the newsletter comes out, what Sunday's topic will be. Any comments or questions or concerns from anyone about anything at all in spiritual life before we begin? Because the gospel concerns all of spiritual life. All right, dears. Irma, where are we? And let us proceed.
Can you all hear me well, Brother Shankara?
I can hear you well. I assume everyone
All
else.
of you are able to hear me? Okay.
There's
Good evening and
not.
namaste, everyone. So
Namaste.
glad to see all of you today, our holy company. We have missed so badly for last few months.
Yes.
And we are on PDF. It's page 57, Mahimacharan and Pratap Hazra. That's where I'm going to start. Page 57 on PDF, but I'm not sure about the book. You may be able to figure it out going backwards a little bit or forward a few
53
pages.
in the book.
Okay. Mahimacharan and Pratap Hazra. Mahimacharan and Pratap Hazra were two devotees outstanding for their pretentiousness and idiosyncrasies. But the master showed them his unfailing love and kindness, though he was aware of their shortcomings. Mahimacharan Chakravarti had met the master long before the arrival of the other disciples. He had had the intention of leading a spiritual life, but a strong desire to acquire name and fame was his weakness. He claimed to have been initiated by Totapuri and used to say that he had been following the path of knowledge according to his guru's instructions. He possessed a large library of English and Sanskrit books. But though he pretended to have read them, most of the leaves were uncut. The
Just
master
for those
knew.
of you who don't know, in those days, when you purchased a book, the book had not been finished in the sense that we think of a book being finished now. That is to say, the leaves had not been cut apart from one another, so that you had to cut them yourself, and you did that as you read the book. So this fellow
Mahimacharan.
Thank you. He was very pretentious and had this large library of books, most of which had not been read. The evidence was the leaves had not been cut. And the master actually sent M to discover this. He had intuited it. The master had intuited it. And he sent M to Macharan's house. And sure enough, the most of the books, both in its English and Sanskrit, the leaves had not been cut. So there we are.
That's right.
A pretentious man,
Right.
yearning for name and fame. Okay, dear?
The master knew all his limitations, yet enjoyed listening to him recite from the Vedas and other scriptures. He would always exhort Mahima to meditate on the meaning of the scriptural texts and to practice spiritual discipline. Pratap Hazra, a middle-aged man, hailed from a village near Kamarpakur. He was not altogether unresponsive to religious feelings. On a moment's impulse, he had left his home, aged mother, wife, and children, and had found shelter in the temple garden at Dakshineshwar, where he intended to lead a spiritual life. He loved to argue, and the master often pointed him out as an example of barren argumentation. He was hypercritical of others and cherished an exaggerated notion of his own spiritual advancement. He was mischievous and often tried to upset the minds of the master's young disciples, criticizing them for their happy and joyous life and asking them to devote their time to meditation. The master teasingly compared Hazra to Jatila and Kutila, the two women who always created obstructions in Krishna's sport with the gopis, and said that Hazra lived at Dakshineshwar to thicken the plot by adding complications. Next subheading is Some Noted Men.
Hang on just one moment.
Yes,
You
please.
think at all about this Mahimacharan or Hazra? Hazra was an interesting character because he lived right there with the master and often argued with the master and loved to argue his points of view with the master's young disciples, particularly Narendra, who became Swami Vivekananda. And Narendra, at one point, thought more highly of Hazra than he did of the master. He said the master's realizations and the things that the master said about his experiences, he said, these are all hallucinations, and was entranced with the apparent practicality of Hazra's way of being. So this is why the master said Hazra is here to thicken the plot. He's here to create complications, to create things that must then be resolved, which is, of course, a charming way of saying to confuse the minds of the young devotees so that the master could then unconfuse them. And it's interesting about Mahimacharan. What he would say to Mahimacharan, he liked to hear Mahimacharan recite the Vedas and other. But then Mahimacharan would say that he was practicing these disciplines. And the master said, no, only outwardly. You must assimilate this. You must take it in and digest it and make it a part of yourself. Then it will be transformative, because nothing of or very little of what Mahimacharan was doing was transformative. And that is, of course, the test of spiritual life. Does it transform us? Spiritual practice. And this, of course, was what the master was all about with both his young disciples that later became the Ramakrishna monks and his householder devotees, transforming them. And that's what we'll hear about as we go on in the Gita. In the Gospel. Anything else from anyone about any of that? Okay, dear, go right ahead.
Some noted men. Sri Ramakrishna also became acquainted with a number of people whose scholarship or wealth entitled them everywhere to respect. He had met a few years before Devendranath Tagore, famous all over Bengal for his wealth, scholarship, saintly character, and social position. But the master found him disappointing, for whereas Sri Ramakrishna expected of a saint complete renunciation of the world, Devendranath combined with his saintliness a life of enjoyment. Sri Ramakrishna met the great poet Michael Madhusudan, who had embraced Christianity for the sake of his stomach. To him, the master could not impart instruction, for the Divine Mother pressed his tongue. In addition, he met Maharaja Jatindra Mohan Tagore, a titled aristocrat of Bengal, Christodas Pav, the editor, social reformer, and a patriot, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, the noted philanthropist and educator, Pandit Sasadar, a great champion of Hindu orthodoxy, Ashwini Kumar Datta, a headmaster, moralist, and leader of Indian nationalism, and Bankim Chatterjee, a deputy magistrate, novelist, and essayist, and one of the fashioners of modern Bengali prose. Sri Ramakrishna was not the man to be dazzled by outward show, glory, or eloquence. A pundit without discrimination, he regarded as a mere straw. He would search people's hearts for the light of God, and if that was missing, he would have nothing to do with them. Next, we're talking about Christodas Paul.
When it says he would have nothing to do with them,
he would search
you
people.
take that quite literally. He would come and he would estimate, or he would essay their character and the depth of their sincerity, and if they weren't, in his estimate, worthy of his time and attention, he would very kindly send them off to look at the temple gardens or visit the Kali temple, but he wouldn't spend any time with them or interact with them. He had better things to do with his time. It is very touching sometimes. These people come and they seem like wonderful people. But Sri Ramakrishna can see who they really are. And so he sends them away.
Makes me, I don't even know where I got it from, but it was in the last day or so, but where the believe it was the Holy Mother had brought him some food, and he's like, "Why did you bring this food to me? This food is dirt," because an holy person had been involved or had made the food or whatever. And Mother more or less pulls rank on him and tells him, that if this person, took, like, I guess the person was a devotee of the Mother, and she said, if this person's my devotee, then you're eating the food, is kind of the way I understood it.
Well, that happened. Yes, it's true. And it's interesting how you say pulled rank. Yes, it was the Mother is in charge. And Sri Ramakrishna himself acknowledged this. So yes, he did in fact eat the food. Even though in his estimate, the person who had prepared it was of questionable character. Anything else? Thank you, Bhagavan Das.
So what I was wondering about all this is, so why the difference in the Mother and Sri Ramakrishna on how selective Sri Ramakrishna was on disciples versus the Mother?
Well, this was very deliberate on his part. He said, I will have just a few disciples. And she, at one time, was lamenting about the fact that since they had no physical relationship, she would have no children. And he said, oh, don't you worry. You will have many, many children. And it was up to her to digest the worldliness of her disciples. And she was capable of it, of course, though it gave her actual physical pain. But the master, as was just remarked earlier, he wouldn't interact with anybody that was of questionable character. But here the Mother actually had a devotee of questionable character who cooked food, and the Mother herself partook of it and gave it to the master to eat as well. So she had literally thousands, it's not certain how many, but over 2,000 disciples. She became involved with the master when she was just in her teens. She was born in 1853. So before 1873, she was living at Dakshineshwar. But she lived on until 1920. The master, of course, left the body in August of 1886. The Mother lived on until July of 1920. And it's only in recent years that some of her latest disciples died. One of them lived on Long Island in New York. Another was interviewed by Swami Sarvadevananda, a woman who I believe lived in Varanasi. I think so, yes. So the Mother had many disciples. And if you read her life, you see that sometimes their imperfections, their worldliness, though she took them and initiated them and gave them her shelter and her grace, it caused her literal physical pain. So she was the Sri Ramakrishna said, and Holy Mother verified, they were one being in two forms because they had different purposes in the world. It's the Mother, I mean, the Ramakrishna brought together the young men who became the Ramakrishna order, but it's actually Holy Mother who started it. It was Vivekananda went to her, and she was the one who made all the decisions in in the beginning, and then turned it over to Rakal Maharaj, Swami Brahmananda, who became the president. But even then, he would go to her for any crucial decision. So this went on until really the very end of her life, about 1919, when her health became so bad that it became difficult for her to be both a mother to her devotees and mother to the order. So she lived until 1920. Brahmananda lived until 1922. So he lived on a couple of years after she did. Actually, he was pretty much solely responsible for running the order from about 1918. So these are titanic personalities. Brahmananda himself took on many, many people as disciples who, he purified them by his grace, but they again caused him physical pain. He would get, in his case, it manifested as indigestion and headaches.
Does that still occur with swamis and people who are the face of the eternal teacher in the order today?
Well, it certainly was true of Swahananda. I was told it was true of Swami Prabhavananda. This is why we were told not to touch him. He could touch us, but we were not to touch him. But I was with Swami Prabhavananda only 3.5 years. But I know that there were times when Swahananda would become ill. In his case, it was often respiratory, upper respiratory issues, but digestive as well. So I know that. Now, I don't know whether it's true of Sarvadevananda or not. I've never spoken with him about it. Sarvadevananda being the one who was in charge of the Vedanta Society of Southern California and all that means now.
It may not be that, but I've observed him enough and seen enough of his teachings. He does have indigestion or digestional issues.
It's true, he does.
I can tell from just watching him. But, I don't know if like say if it's the same or not.
Well, whether there's a direct connection between the indigestion and the what he's taken on, I cannot but think that there is, because of all of this precedent of the others. But he never really complains about it. If you ask him about it, he will acknowledge that it's there, but he doesn't complain about it.
And he will let you touch him.
Say it again?
And he will let you touch him.
Oh, yes. But he much prefers to touch you. They all do. So Swami Sarvadevananda, again, as Bhagavan Das remarked, the latest instance of the face of the eternal teacher being presented to us. And if you listen to his talks, you see that's who's talking. There's a beautiful talk that he gave recently called "Come, Mother, Come," about the primacy of the Divine Mother, which speaks directly to what we were saying about Sri Sharada Devi, and she being the one who was in charge. It's a beautiful, beautiful talk. And there are, of course, many other instances. Talks he's given here. You can find them online. Anything else from anyone? Thank you, Bhagavan Das. That was good conversation. That's exactly what we're up to here, exploring these things in detail. All right, if there's nothing more, then please read on, dear.
Okay. Next, Christodas Paul. The Europeanized Christodas Paul did not approve of the master's emphasis on renunciation and said, "Sir, this cant of renunciation has almost ruined the country. It is for this reason that the Indians are a subject nation today. Doing good to others, bringing education to the door of the ignorant, and above all, improving the material conditions of the country, this should be our duty now. The cry of religion and renunciation would, on the contrary, only weaken us. You should advise the young men of Bengal to resort only to such acts as will uplift the country." Sri Ramakrishna gave him a searching look and found no divine light within. "You man of poor understanding," Sri Ramakrishna said sharply, "you dare to slight in these terms renunciation and piety, which our scriptures describe as the greatest of all virtues. After reading 2 pages of English, you think you have come to know the world. You appear to think you are omniscient. Well, have you seen those tiny crabs that are born in the Ganges just when the rains set in? In this big universe, you are even less significant than one of those small creatures. How dare you talk of helping the world? The Lord will look to that. You haven't the power in you to do it." After a pause, the master continued, Can you explain to me how you can work for others? I know what you mean by helping them, to feed a number of persons, to treat them when they're sick, to construct a road or dig a well. Isn't that all? These are good deeds, no doubt. But how trifling in comparison with the vastness of the universe.
Trifling, how trifling.
Yes, trifling. Sorry. These are good deeds, no doubt, but how trifling in comparison with the vastness of the universe. How far can a man advance in this line? How many people can you save from famine? Malaria has ruined a whole province. What could you do to stop its onslaught? God alone looks after the world. Let a man first realize him. Let a man get the authority from God and be endowed with his power. Then and then alone may he think of doing good to others. A man should first be purged of all egotism. Then alone will be the blissful mother ask him to work for the world. Sri Ramakrishna mistrusted philanthropy that presumed to pose as charity. He warned people against it. He saw in most acts of philanthropy nothing but egotism, vanity, a desire for glory, a barren excitement to kill the boredom of life, or an attempt to soothe a guilty conscience.
Hold on just a moment, dear.
Yes.
Sometimes people ask, did Sri Ramakrishna get angry? When it says here, and M did not use these terms lightly. When he said the master spoke sharply, it wasn't that he was angry in the sense that he had lost his temper. He knew that he must speak with great alacrity and sharpness to address the intellect of this man that he was correcting. He must have seen something in him. Otherwise, he would have just dismissed him. So he saw the possibility that this man could be more than he was. And so he spoke to him sharply. Now that if you look through the gospel from beginning to end, you find very few instances in which The M uses that term or something analogous to it. The master mostly spoke very sweetly, kindly, and persuasively to people, because that was where they could be met at that level. But this man needed this sharpness. So this is why Sri Ramakrishna spoke to him the way he did. And if we read, well, I'm not suggesting we do, but if you read those passages over again, you see very strong correction to our own tendencies to want to do good in the world. Do good for yourself. Do good for yourself, as Sri Ramakrishna says. And this is exactly what Jesus meant when he said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. All knowledge, all wisdom, all that was hidden will be revealed." If you want to know what to do in the world, as Sri Ramakrishna said, draw near to God. All problems, all paradoxes, all doubts and fears will disappear. But that's only done through turning away from the outward world, the world of the senses, at least for a time. We turn away from it. We say, neti, neti, not this, not that. We turn away from it and turn within until we hear that voice of inner wisdom, that voice that speaks without words, but speaks to us very clearly and allows us to understand the true nature of reality and our role in it. And then we know what to do in the world. As Sri Ramakrishna says, you will get a command to do what it is you're supposed to do in the world. You won't have to think, what is my swadharma? What is it that I should do? If you draw near to God, you will know what it is that you should do. And of course, this is the desire of the spiritual aspect. What shall I do? How shall I behave? Well, Sri Ramakrishna says, if you turn within, draw near to God, you will know for certain. Any comment or question or discussion about that? Okay, dear. Please go.
Okay. True charity, he taught, is the result of love of God, service to man in a spirit of worship. Now we're talking about monastic disciples. The disciples whom the master trained for monastic life were the following. 1. Narendranath Datta, who is Swami Vivekananda. Nitya Niranjan Sen, Swami Niranjanananda. Rakul Chandra Ghosh, Swami Brahmananda. Kali Prasad Chandra, Swami Abhedananda. Gopal Chandra Ghosh, Swami Advaitananda. Harinath Chattopadhyaya, Swami Turiyananda. Baburam Ghosh, Swami Premananda. Sarada Prasanna is Swami Triguna Titananda. Taranad Ghoshal is Swami Shivananda. Gangadhar Ghatak is Swami Akhandananda. Jogindranath Chaudhary is Swami Yogananda. Subodh Ghosh is Swami Subodhananda. Shashi Bhushan Chakravarti is Swami Ramakrishnananda. Sarachanda Chakravarti is Swami Saradananda. Hari Prasanna Chatterjee is Swami Vijnanananda. Latu is Swami Adhutananda. Those are the disciples that master trained for monastic life. And the next is about Latu.
They all became wonders in their own right. If you study the lives of these people, these young and older men that the master gathered together. What a crowd. What a crowd. His band of minstrels, he called them. What do minstrels do? Minstrels go out on their own and sing the songs and educate the people through their singing. That's the role of a minstrel. And this is exactly what they did, each of them, in their own way.
So,
Swami Nikhilananda was Swami Swahananda's guru. Go ahead, Bhagavandas.
so like myself and Daniel and yourself, all our lineage comes from Swami Brahmananda. But
Yeah.
do all the different disciples, do they all follow the same type of path? Like, I mean, we are clearly bhakti, practitioners, but do other follow different paths of
Yeah.
the different?
Very, very good question. No, they didn't. And not all of them took disciples. Not all of them did. There were jnanis among them, and they didn't have disciples. There were karma, but the master taught that bhakti is the appropriate relationship. That this devotional relationship is the appropriate one for this time. So they were all in one way or another bhaktas, but they also had other aspects. Swami Abhedananda, for example, he taught in India and in the West for 25 years. He never took any disciples. He created, at the end of his life, he created an organization, but he did not take any disciples. Babaram had no disciples. Swami Premananda. So Turiyananda had disciples. Of course, Vivekananda, not very many, but he had disciples. Ramananda had many disciples. And Holy Mother's encouragement, he had many disciples. Among them was Swami Prabhupada, which is our lineage, as you said. It comes down Ramananda, Prabhupada, and then Sarvadevananda ourselves. There's some Shankaranandas in between there. Brahmananda, Shankarananda, Sarvadevananda, and ourselves. So, but the lineage is direct. The teachings are Sri Ramakrishna's teachings as presented to us and offered to us, because there's only one eternal teacher. There's only one consciousness, capital C, that represents itself, that is in our awareness as the eternal teacher. But its teachings are appropriate to whoever is being taught. And so it may not be at all the same for one person as it is for another. There'll be elements that are the same, particularly if you take initiation. But because the initiation comes directly and very articulately from Sri Ramakrishna. But not all of them had disciples, and not all of them followed the same path by any manner or means. If you studied their lives, I forget that there's two books. He lived with them, they lived with him. One is about the householders' disciples, when the other is about the monastic disciples. I can't remember, keep straight which title has to do with the monastic disciples. But if you read it, you learn a great deal. And another book to read, if you haven't already read it, is Ramakrishna and His Disciples by Christopher Isherwood. And he talks a great deal about how very different these different swamis became. Thank you, Bhagavan Das, as always. Anything else from anyone? All right, read on, dear.
Now we're talking about each disciple. That is number 1, Latu. The first of these young men to come to the master was Latu. Born of obscure parents in Bihar, he came to Calcutta in search of work and was engaged by Ramachandra Datta as houseboy. Learning of the saintly Sri Ramakrishna, he visited the master at Dakshineshwar and was deeply touched by his cordiality. When he was about to leave, the master asked him to take some money and return home in a boat or carriage. But Latu declared he had a few pennies and jingled the coins in his pocket. Sri Ramakrishna later requested Ram to allow Latu to stay with him permanently. Under Sri Ramakrishna's guidance, Latu made great progress in meditation and was blessed with ecstatic visions. But all the efforts of the master to give him a smattering of education failed. Latu was very fond of kirtan and other devotional songs, but he remained all his life illiterate.
Though he became a great Swami
Yes,
and
Adbhutananda.
disciples himself,
Yes.
and was very stern with his disciples.
Next is Rakal. Even before Rakal's coming to Dakshineshwar, the master had had visions of him as his spiritual son and as a playmate of Krishna at Vrindavan. Rakal was born of wealthy parents. During his childhood, he developed wonderful spiritual traits and used to play at worshipping gods and goddesses. In his teens, he was married to a sister of Manmohan Mitra, from whom he first heard of the master. His father objected to his association with Sri Ramakrishna, but afterwards was reassured to find that many celebrated people were visitors at Dakshineshwar. The relationship between the master and this beloved disciple was that of mother and child. Sri Ramakrishna allowed Rakal many liberties denied to others, but he would not hesitate to chastise the boy for improper actions. At one time, Rakal felt a childlike jealousy because he found that other boys were receiving the master's affection. He soon got over it and realized his guru as the guru of the whole universe. The master was worried to hear of his marriage, but was relieved to find that his wife was a spiritual soul who would not be a hindrance to his progress. Next comes the elder Gopal. Gopal Chandra Ghosh came to Dakshineshwar at a rather advanced age and was called the elder Gopal. He had lost his wife, and the master assuaged his grief. Soon he renounced the world and devoted himself fully to meditation and prayer. Some years later, Gopal gave the master the ochre cloths, and with which the latter initiated several of his disciples into monastic life. Narendra, next. To spread his message to the four corners of the earth, Sri Ramakrishna needed a strong instrument. With his frail body and delicate limbs, he could not make great journeys across wide spaces. And such an instrument was found in Narendranath Datta, his beloved Naren, later known to the world as Swami Vivekananda. Even before meeting Narendranath, The master had seen him in a vision as a sage, immersed in the meditation of the Absolute, who at Sri Ramakrishna's request had agreed to take human birth to assist him in his work. Narendra was born in Calcutta on January 12, 1863, of an aristocratic Kayastha family. His mother was steeped in the great Hindu epics, and his father, a distinguished attorney of the Calcutta High Court, was an agnostic about religion, a friend of the poor, and a mocker at social conventions. Even in his boyhood and youth, Narendra possessed a great physical courage and presence of mind, a vivid imagination, deep power of thought, keen intelligence, an extraordinary memory, a love of truth, a passion for purity, a spirit of independence, and a tender heart. An expert musician, he also acquired proficiency in physics, astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, history, and literature. He grew up into an extremely handsome young man. Even as a child, he practiced meditation and showed great power of concentration. Though free and passionate in word and action, he took the vow of austere religious chastity and never allowed the fire of purity to be extinguished by the slightest defilement of body or soul.
Now, let me just make a comment.
Please do. Thank you, Brother Shan.
We all know that Vivekananda came to the Parliament of World Religions in September of 1893 and gave many wonderful talks. He became the star of that parliament. That's a fact, not a proud devotee talking. But the first time he spoke, he rose and said, "Sisters and brothers of America." Now, according to the newspaper accounts of the time, the audience, which was variously recounted as 4,000 to 7,000, they rose to their feet and gave him a standing ovation that was variously reported as 1.5 to 2 minutes. Now, when Swami Vivekananda was asked, "Why did they give you this standing ovation? What was it about you or what you said, this simple statement, sisters and brothers of America, that produced this amazing reaction in the audience?" And Swami Vivekananda replied, "Well, perhaps it is because I have not had an unclean thought. I have not had an unclean thought since age 16. And you can imagine, he was 29 years old in 1863. It wasn't yet his 30th birthday. So this is the power of spiritual discernment and renunciation. He had not had an unclean thought since age 16. And so this is what caused the audience to have this tremendous reaction. That was his speculation. So perhaps you can read again, Ima, what he said about,
Sure, Brother
said
Shankara.
about him.
Definitely. Narendra was born in Calcutta on January 12, 1863, of an
Have to
aristocratic,
go that far back, dear.
just a few lines before.
Just a few lines about.
Okay, sure. An expert musician, he also acquired proficiency in physics, astronomy, mathematics, philosophy,
Hang on just a
history.
minute. Dear. Somebody's come into the room. Yes, dear?
I'm sorry, I'm just bringing your laundry and I'm gonna put your bag in.
Well, thank you, dear.
You're welcome.
So one of the very kind ladies who takes care of me here just
Okay.
brought my laundry back and is going to put a new trash bag in.
Oh, that's
That's
great.
what she just said.
Yes.
So sorry for the interruption.
No
But
problem.
it's very sweet that they take such good care of me here.
That's good. That's good.
So
Darshan.
you were
I'll go back
about to
to
read.
this. An expert musician, he also acquired proficiency in physics, astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, history, and literature. He grew up into an extremely handsome young man. Even as a child, he practiced meditation and showed great power of concentration. Though free and passionate in word and action, he took the vow of austere religious chastity and never allowed the fire of purity to be extinguished by the slightest defilement of body or soul.
This is what triggered my remark.
As he read in college the rationalistic Western philosophers of the 19th century, his boyhood faith in God and religion was unsettled. He would not accept religion on mere faith. He wanted demonstration of God. But very soon, his passionate nature discovered that mere universal reason was cold and bloodless. His emotional nature, dissatisfied with a mere abstraction, required a concrete support to help him in the hours of temptation. He wanted an external power, a guru, who by embodying perfection in the flesh would still the commotion of his soul. Attracted by the magnetic personality of Keshav, he joined the Brahmo Samaj and became a singer in its choir. But in the Samaj, he did not find the guru who could say that he had seen God. In a state of mental conflict and torture of soul, Narendra came to Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar. He was then 18 years of age and had been in college 2 years. He entered the master's room accompanied by some light-hearted friends. At Sri Ramakrishna's request, he sang a few songs, pouring his whole soul into them, and the master went into samadhi. A few minutes later, Sri Ramakrishna suddenly left his seat, took Narendra by the hand, and led him to the screened veranda north of his room. They were alone. Addressing Narendra most tenderly, as if he were a friend of long acquaintance, the master said, you have come very late. Why have you been so unkind as to make me wait all these days? My ears are tired of hearing the futile words of worldly men. Oh, how I have longed to pour my spirit into the heart of someone fitted to receive my message. He talked thus, sobbing all the time. Then, standing before Narendra with folded hands, he addressed him as Narayana, born on earth to remove the misery of humanity. Grasping Narendra's hand, he asked him to come again, alone and very soon. Narendra was startled. What is this I have come to see? He said to himself. He must be stark mad. Why am I the son of Vishwanath Datta? How dare he speak this way to me? When they returned to the room and Narendra heard the master speaking to others, he was surprised to find in his words an inner logic, a striking sincerity, and a convincing proof of his spiritual nature. In answer to Narendra's question, Sir, have you seen God? The master said, Yes, I've seen God. I've seen him more tangibly than I see you. I've talked to him more intimately than I'm talking to you. Continuing, the master said, But my child, who wants to see God? People shed jugs of tears for money, wife, and children. But if they would weep for God for only one day, they would surely see him. Narendra was amazed. These words he could not doubt. This was the first time he had ever heard a man saying that he had seen God. But he could not reconcile these words of the master with the scene that had taken place on the veranda only a few minutes before. He concluded that Sri Ramakrishna was a monomaniac and returned home rather puzzled in mind. During his second visit, about a month later, suddenly, at the touch of the master, Narendra felt overwhelmed and saw the walls of the room and everything around him whirling and vanishing. What are you doing to me? He cried in terror. I have my father and mother at home. He saw his own ego and the whole universe almost swallowed in a nameless void. With a laugh, the master easily restored him. Narendra thought he might have been hypnotized, but he could not understand how a monomaniac could cast a spell over the mind of a strong person like himself. He returned home more confused than ever, resolved to be henceforth on his guard before this strange man.
Okay, let's leave it off there.
Sure.
Let's mark that place.
Sure, brother.
Any comments or questions or any thoughts about anything that's been read?
This last passage is very fascinating to me. Are there any other accounts of this happening?
Yes, Sardananda, Swami Sardananda, wrote a book that was translated into English as The Great Master, and then more recently translated, that was in the 1940s, I think, and then more recently translated by Swami Chitanananda into more modern English as Sri Ramakrishna, His Divine Play. And there is more about that incident and the early relationship of Narendra and the master.
When this happens to people, what exactly is happening, do we think?
What happens to you?
When Sri Rama touched Vivekananda and he started going into, or the world.
He was putting him into samadhi. He was putting him into samadhi. But of course, Narendra, not yet Vivekananda, had never experienced anything like this. So it says, and believe me, these words are not used again casually by him. He reacted in terror. What are you doing to me? I have my father and mother at home. The reason for that remark is he was the eldest son, and he was responsible for his aging parents. As we'll see, that came to be a very, very difficult situation later on because of his father's improvidence. But so the Sri Ramakrishna was putting him into samadhi, and he did this with all of his direct disciples, even some of the householders' disciples. He gave them, and the Sri Ramakrishna said, there are thousands of kinds of samadhi. And so he would give them the samadhi that was suited to them. Narendra, he gave Nirvikalpa samadhi, as he did to Swami Brahmananda and Baburam, Premananda. I don't remember if any of the others. Probably Turiyananda. I don't recall. But all of that's recounted in the Great Master or Sri Ramakrishna, his divine play. There's much more about the relationship between the Master and each of his disciples in that book. It's a big, thick book, 3 inches thick in its version as the Great Master. We have both versions at the Center's bookshop if you want to buy a copy.
So, but basically this comes down through the order with the eternal teacher, I would think, correct?
Well, what comes down, dear?
The touching of a disciple and then they going into samadhi.
This is again, Bhagavan Das, the relationship between each of the teachers and their disciples. It's said that Swami Prabhavananda did this. Yes. I don't know. I never was told that Swami Swahananda did this, though he may have. He certainly was capable of it, I'm sure. But he didn't do it with me. He did give me some other experiences, but not what I would call samadhi. So I just don't know, dear, whether this happens with each of the teachers as they come along. As I say, it was said that Swami Prabhavananda did this with some of his disciples, notably Swami Krishnananda, who was his personal attendant. He gave him samadhi, whether it was Savikalpa samadhi, which is an experience, or Nirvikalpa, no one ever said. But what Swami Prabhavananda would say when anyone had wanted to talk to him about samadhi, he would say, well, you first achieve Savikalpa samadhi, then we'll talk about the higher forms of samadhi. And so this is an indication that Savikalpa samadhi is attainable through our own self-effort. But you have to then ask the question, who is the self that is making the effort? And when we become a spiritual aspirant, it is clearly the divine self that is making the effort. And as Sri Ramakrishna says, it will happen at exactly the right time and in exactly the right way. Is all of that clear? All right.
Brother Shankara, its time is up. It's 8:30, past 8:30. Do you
Yes.
want, I can stop here so that it'll give you enough time to get to bed and all that.
Well, yes, that's where we should stop.
Yes.
That's what I said. Mark your books there.
Oh, okay. Okay. I did hear you well. Thank you. That's good.
And so we'll close as we usually do
We'll start next week.
with our chants. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we all be safe. May we all be healthy. May we all be cheerful. May we all have peace of mind. And may we all go forward in the knowledge that we're in the loving and protective embrace of the Lord as we know and understand that word. Whatever form of the divine that is offering us their love and protection. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. So may we all be well and in bright spirits. And that'll do it for tonight. Until tomorrow night, when we take up, as I said, the Gita. We're coming very close to the end of the Gita. So Wednesday night, our reader is Swayam Prabha, and we will take up the Gita. So
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
thank you all, dears. It's
Glad
so
to be
good
back.
to be with you. So good to be
Good
with
night,
you.
everybody.
Good night.